Family, I just wanted to talk about something real fast. This is just a little extra to something yesterday that I didn't get into. I just want to talk about who the Amorites are. I'm 100%. So I'm going to let this little video play and then we're going to talk about it.
The Fall of Ur.
If we go back over the history of the region, we know that nomadic people from the west had always been a nuisance to the Mesopotamian occupiers. The Akkadian king Shah-Kali-Shari certainly had his fair share of problems with these people who were considered to be uncouth by comparison to people of the organised societies of Akkad and Sumer. These western peoples were the Amorites, who were still living a very nomadic way of life without the organised, sedentary or agricultural lifestyle of the Mesopotamians. However, the Amorites had always looked upon the Mesopotamian societies as fair pickings, so if there were any spoils to be taken from the fringes, then they would do so, but the reality was that they were never really any kind of serious threat to the region, as organised societies of Mesopotamia could easily chase them out.
So as always, fair use. So family, today I'm just gonna get right to the point of what I'm gonna show today, and what I found. So I found out something very, very interesting about the Amorites. I think it's very important to talk about. But before I do that, as always, gotta show this history, and then I'm gonna dive into what's going on here. Just get a little historical understandings.
Summer to tend their herds. Conflict between the settled civilizations in Mesopotamia and the Amorites began as early as the reign of Akkadian king Shah-Kali-Shari, in whose reign a battle was fought with the nomads, as attested to by his 12th year name. Significant numbers of Amorites moving into the Tigris-Euphrates region, as mentioned before, was a key factor in the decline and fall of the 3rd dynasty of Ur, with their initial mass settlement in the Mesopotamian region being dated to this period. The Amorite invasions of the Near East took place in several phases. During the first, they invaded and dominated Palestine. In the second, they thrust north and invaded the Syrian region, including Ebla, Mari, Yamhad, Katna, and Ekalatam. Finally, they invaded northern and southern Mesopotamia, taking root and establishing dynasties in Isin, Larsa, and Babylon. Upon encountering the sophisticated and seemingly splendorous civilization which had developed in the Euphrates-Tigris region, they must have wanted to become a part of it and never left, melding so well into the local populations that after a few decades they were indistinguishable from the natives.
All right, so you heard how it said they were indistinguishable from their natives, from the people around. That's very important because when you think about Babylon, when you think of Paleo-Babylonian Empire, the ancient Babylonian Empire, those are going to be from the Amorites. But let me show you something what's interesting about that. A lot of nations are actually going to be highly related to them. But what we're going to see today is something very interesting. But first, just to get the time frame of what I'm talking about, I'm going to show you genetics. I'm going to show you who the Amorites actually are. I'm going to show you exactly who the Amorites are. But first, let's look at the ancient society of the Amorites, which down here, you can see right here, we're talking BC time. Now we're talking during this time, Israel would be in the land of Egypt, right? Talking about the time, this is going to be Abraham passing to Isaac, passing to Jacob. And then by that time, about Jacob's time, so Jacob's about, they'll say 17 BC, 16 BC, something around there. Around that time, that's when you'll have the tribes, and they'll spend some time in Egypt. So remember that. They're going to be north. They're not going to be in the Levant at this time. They're going to be in Egypt, right? Past the wilderness, in Egypt. So whatever is going on in this Levant, whatever genetics we find in this Levant, we're going to find individuals that will actually show us who are the Amorites in the Amorite state. Because during that time, the people who ruled that nation was actually the Amorites. Not just the Canaanites, but also the Amorites. The Amorites were reigning over here. So you can see that large rule right there. We're going to see this time frame, and we're going to see the ancient genetics in that time. It's going to be very, very interesting. So let's take a look. So we're going to find out exactly 100% who are the Amorites. So really interesting. That was a saying to Abraham, right? It says right here, Genesis 15-16, but in the fourth generation, they shall come here again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. All right. Very interesting. A little extra deep history. See if I can get the whole thing in.
And they were considered such a threat to Mesopotamia that the king of Ur in the year 2000 BC or thereabouts, a guy named Shushin, built a wall 170 miles long between the Tigris River and the Euphrates River to keep out the Amorites. But it didn't work. The Amorites got around the wall, and by the time of Abram and his call, the Amorites were in control of all of those kingdoms from Babylon all the way over to Canaan. Now, eventually, around 1600 BC, they finally got pushed out by the Kassites, the Elamites, people coming down from the mountains and coming from the east. They shoved them back. But there were forbidden religious practices that were ascribed to the Amorites. One of the most notorious tribes of the Amorites, they had different tribes, just like the people of Israel had different tribes, Judah, Simeon, Issachar, so on. The Amorites had a tribe called the Sutians. They think, scholars do, that this word Sutian means son of Seth, son of Adam. I've got a different theory, but I'm having a scholar get out before I go public with it, so hurry up, Mike, I want your answer. The Sutians were regarded by the Sumerians as lawless and violent mercenaries who had to be kept out. Again, that 170-mile wall stretching between the rivers. But the Sutians are mentioned in the Bible. There's a prophecy against the Sutians. Remember Balaam, the one whose donkey talked to him? Hired by the king of Moab to give a prophecy against Israel, but he could only bless Israel? But in that prophecy, Numbers 24, verse 7, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. That's a messianic prophecy. It shall crush the forehead of Moab and break down all the sons of Sheth, the Sutians, sons of Sheth. Now, the Akkadian word for Sutians was Shutu. The Egyptian word for Shutu was Shazu. These evil, lawless, violent mercenaries who were engaging all kind of evil stuff were the ones that King Ramses the Great's people were beating up because they were spying for the enemy, the Hittites. The Babylonian Empire, this is a point that needs to be emphasized. The Babylonian Empire, as we think of it, was founded in 1894 BC or thereabouts by the Amorites. So when we think of the evil of Babylon, which has become a byword for spiritual, supernatural evil, down to the days of the apostles, where John used Babylon, Mystery Babylon the Great, as a symbol of the one world occult religion of the end times, that was founded by the Amorites. These guys. And what does it have to do with the Amorites in Canaan circa 1400 BC, when Joshua was coming to the land? Everything. Remember the dimensions of Og's bed? I mean, here you've got like a military record Moses has written down in the Bible. And he takes time out to say, oh, by the way, Og of Bashan, his bed was 13.6 by 6 foot. Not coincidentally, those dimensions match exactly the dimensions of a cultic bed located in a ziggurat in Babylon called the Etemenanki, the house of heaven and earth, temple of the foundation of heaven and earth. The Etemenanki was the home, the temple of the chief Babylonian god Marduk. This bed was the place where every year on New Year, as part of their New Year festival, Marduk and his consort, the goddess Zarpanatu, would descend and have ritual lovemaking to bless the land for the coming year. Moses was tying this ritual to Og of Bashan, the king of the Amorites, from the Amorite kingdom of Babylon. Now here's another thing, and this just shows how wickedly clever the Hebrews are. They love a good pun. Even in the 16th, 15th century BC, they loved a good pun. The Sumerian name for Amorite, as I mentioned before, is Mar-tu. Okay? The Sumerian name for Marduk, the god of the Amorites, is Amar-utu. It's a pun. Moses was making a point that would have been familiar to everybody in the ancient Near East in the 15th century BC. Og, the king of the Rephaim, last of the Rephaim, king of the Amorites, he's one of these guys that does these ritual practices that the Lord has absolutely forbidden. Og was practicing the sin of the Babylonians. The iniquity of the Amorites was the iniquity of Babylon.
So you see why I'm showing you this? Because this is the origins of Babylon. You ever heard that term, mystery Babylon? You're about to find out the real mystery and the answer to that today. So the Amorites, they destroyed the ancient place of Abraham that Abraham left. Remember, he had left that place. He left Ur, and that place was taken and destroyed by the Babylonians. But now I'm going to show you something really interesting. I'm going to open this. I think I need to log in this. That's all right. I don't need this thing. Because going down, what it is basically is a note on some information that I found out that I was talking about, right? I seen this person and they was like, I am a Assyrian from Iran. Sumerians, Akkadians, Amorites, Assyrians, and Babylonians are all blood related. I completely agree. And the reason why is because that's what I started to find out. That the more you look at the genetics in the land, the more, in fact, I'm not the only one that's saying this. I'm going to show you that what geneticists are saying about these things. You can see these are actually later turned into what people now call Armenians. Long story short on how they keep changing to the Matadi and all that stuff. But you can see right here, the Amorites, they actually come here. Some of them even get on this side over here. They even came over here and crossed over and got over here. So the Amorites had a lot of control in these areas. So we're going to be looking at that today. I'm going to show you a report from Cell. It's a very interesting report. And first thing I'm going to show you from this report, I'm just going to go down and take a look here just to make sure it's that one. All right. Yeah. So this is going to be a very, very interesting report. So coincidentally, these is going to be basically, long story short, we're going to be looking at certain places. And the reason why is because I'm going to read you something real fast before I show you this. Let me read you this. This is off of, I'm going to show you something. This is why it's always nice to see Wiki, what it says sometimes. Go down to ancient genetics, and you'll see a list of some ancient genetics. Listen to what it says here. Some of these places, I always forget how you pronounce them with the way you say them. Alka, or something like that. Al-la-ka, I don't even say if you can say that. Amorite city-state. This is an Amorite city-state. This is from 1930 to 1325 BC, belonging to haplogroup J1-p58. And all these, in fact, a lot of these, this is an Amorite city. Was it Ebla? We're going to look at this one too, but we can see that there's 6 individuals, 3 out of 6 individuals that had J1-p58. That's going to be very important to see. This cave too, but this is Armenia, right? We had talked about that some of them are in the Caucasus. Remember, that's in the mountains. I don't know. I don't have a map open real fast. I'm going to open up a map here just to have a map open, because I think locations matter. Let that in that. All right. So I just want to show you that. That's a different location. That's another place where you get a lot of J1-p58. You can see what else they're talking about there. This place too. 4 male individuals, right? And they're going to also be that J1 line. So we're going to look at that today. We're going to look at some ancient genetics in areas that are actually would be places that the Amorites own. Let's see something real fast. So this little thing that I'm going to show you here, I'm going to open up something. So this is what it's basically talking about. It's going to go up here. Yep, there it is. I was looking for that video. Just load it. But this is basically what it is. Genetic history of Neolithic to Bronze Age Anatolia, Northern Levant, and Southern Caucasus. Okay, so this is what we're going to see. I'm going to show you a quick video on the importance of what this is.
In this study, we analyzed Amorite data from 112 skeletons that were excavated at archaeological sites from Turkey, Syria, and Azerbaijan, and date 7,500 to 3,000 years ago. During this 7,500 to 3,000 years
All right, so those things that I was circling, I'm just going to leave that there for a second. I'm going to leave that there for a second, and we're going to just dive into what's going on here real fast. But before I go to that, because the reason why I want to show you that, I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to show you that these cities, these are actually historically known as Amorite cities. We're going to be looking at this, and we're going to also confirm how we know that these certain cities, Ebla, this one right here, and the ones that I'm going to show you are going to be Amorite cities. That's what's going to be really important. We're going to be looking at their genetics, and we're going to also be putting these things together. So first, before I start showing you a little more history, actually, I like to do it the history first, then get into the genetics. So I'm going to show you a little bit of the history of the cities, and then we're going to get into the genetics. So one by one, each city individually. But first, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do first. History, genetics. Let's do what feels right. Let's do this first.
years ago. During this time transect that corresponds to the late Neolithic and Bronze Age for the Western Asian prehistory, populations transitioned from farming communities to more complex social structures. And what we see in archaeology is that the interconnectivity within Western Asia increased, and areas such as Anatolia, Northern Levant, and Southern Caucasus became a hub for exchange of ideas and material culture. The goal of our study was to understand the role of human mobility throughout this process. What we found it was that actually during the end of the Neolithic, populations from across Anatolia to Caucasus and Zagros in Iran started to biologically mix, forming what we often call in population genetics a gradient of mixed ancestry. And by using admixture dating methods, we could narrow down the timing of this event to around 8,500 years ago. We also found that later on the Bronze Age, Northern Levant experienced introduction of new populations. And these were most likely populations from northern Mesopotamia. However, these populations still remain unsampled. And this finding has been important in the sense that it contributes to already existing archaeological hypotheses who talk about an increase in interregional connectivity in this area around this time, or migration of peoples because of a mega drought event.
So in our study, which is in the framework of the Max Planck Harvard Research Center, we focus on the genetic history of the mobility of people. So one of the sites that we studied in southern Anatolia, which is called Alalakh, we found one female individual that had its ancestry from Central Asia. We're not quite sure if this person herself moved all the way from Central Asia to southern Anatolia or was her ancestors, but certainly there was long distance mobility.
So this is basically a continuation from what we were looking at yesterday and what we were talking about the other day. because what we were looking at the other day, let me show you something. Well, I don't know why this keep opening like that. Close that. You see this right here? Let me just click this and go to these ancient studies right here. So you can see right here, you can see all the way to over here, there's ancient genetics over here. And a lot of these, what you're seeing here is actually going to be of J1, ancient J1 and ancient J-p58. That's what these are. These are ancient J lineages that you can find far away. And this is going to be actually P58 that you're finding in these far lineages. We had talked about it yesterday, but I just want to let you know that that's where the J lineage is a long time ago, that far away. You can see 13 to 900 BC. That's all the way over here, all the way over there. That's going to be far as Turkestan. So you can see what's going on over there, past India, ancient times. So the reason why I want to show you this is because what's going to be shown in this little thing has to be understood in completion. So I'm going to let this video finish.
About 4,000 years ago, which was very unexpected for being such a long time ago. But certainly there was long distance mobility about 4,000 years ago, which was very unexpected for being such a long time ago.
All right, so now that you see that, we're going to look at these genetics first. We're going to take a look at these genetics. So here's genetics of the land, right? We're going to take a look at what they found. This is from that site. This is going to be ancient genetics of individuals in that land. So what we see here, right here, is Y chromosome. And over here is going to be your female lineage. Now, when they said an Asian lineage, that's your X2 right there. See that X2 right there? I'm going to look it up real fast. I'll show you real fast. Let's go to a wiki just so we can pull up the subclads and stuff. And X2. So you can see, right, when we're looking at this X2, here's just a few ideas down here. Go down here so you can get an idea. Some of X2 actually went into the other side of the world, like America. But a lot of the X2 you can also see is observed in Syrians. That's very important. You can actually see it, that it went to one side to another. But that's just a little piece that we want to look at. That's just a little piece that we want to look at. As you can see, your J with the X. You can see a couple different of the X's there. And what you're looking at here, what you're actually looking at the ancient genetics from that land that is actually going to be called a place that the Amorites ruled at, pretty much. We're going to look at another genetic report. But first, let's break down the history as we go. So we're looking at the ancient genetics in these places. So let's take a look here just to get an idea here. Because as you can see, what places they're going to be in, the main places, and also we're going to see how they're all related. So right here, you can see this place, Ebla, and then you're going to have some in this place here. This is going to be an ancient place as well. Here as well. I don't know how you say that. Laka, something like that. 5 out of 12 individuals. And look at the time on that. It's very important. That's J-p58, before Israel comes out of Israel. It's very important. So let's take a look here at some of this history. Let's get a look at here let's get a look here at some of the history.
Hey everyone, welcome to
So this is going to be an Akkadian connection.
maintain the balance of power as well as to secure allies. The kings of Ebla often entered into marriage alliances with the ruling houses of other cities. One example from the archives is where the ruler of Ebla gave his daughter in marriage to the ruler of Imar, another prosperous and fairly powerful city of ancient Syria. As mentioned before, the name Ebla appears in fairly powerful city of ancient Syria.
So you see how Ebla had mixed with Imar. Let's read what it says a little bit, just a little something about Imar. So in the middle of the 3rd millennium BC, Imar came under the influence of the rulers of Ebla. The city is mentioned in archives at Ebla. In Mari, texts of the 18th century BC, Middle Bronze Age, Imar was under the influence of the neighboring Amorite state of Yamhad, right? There was no local tradition of kinship at Imar. For the 13th and the early 12th century BC, so remember that as far as the 13th to the 12th century BC, there is written documentation from Imar itself, mostly in Akkadian language, and also references in basically text, basically whatnot of the, you know how we was talking about the what's the word I'm looking for, the Armenians. This is basically them, or how you say that, this right here. There's gonna be like Armenians and the Hittites in connection with that, and then these ones in Assyria archives are basically in a lot of records. A lot of the records they had recorded a lot of these things about Imar, right? They have basically recorded that Imar was a state that was basically under Amorite control. At the time, Imar was within the Hittite sphere of influence. Now let's talk about a later time. Subject to the king of Carchemish, a Hittite client king. It was the chief of the city of the Hittite border province known as the land of this at Tel or Hill Frey. Now, that's very important to understand because remember we had looked at the Amorites. They have ruled basically from 2000 BC, and it's going to be all the way up to, at the latest, 1200 BC. That's very important, or 1200 BC. That's very important. That's very important. So that's going to be a little bit about Amar. And then you can see Ebla. Here's a little bit about Ebla. The name of the king is Amorite in the view, basically just talking about a little bit of that nation. It is therefore probable that the inhabitants of the 3rd kingdom, Ebla was predominantly Amorite. So basically it's talking about how because it actually went through 3 phases. The kingdoms went through 3 phases. And at its last kingdom, they just basically saying that was still mostly Amorite, as were most of the inhabitants of Syria at that time. All right, you see what's going on there? So also a little bit more on these historical facts.
This production is brought to you by Ancient of local kings, possibly collaborators, if not subordinates, of the rulers of the Ur and abandonment.
The Amorites. At this point we should say something about the Amorites, who will figure prominently in one way or another through much of the next part of our story. They are probably best known today as one of the peoples of the Old Testament, where they are listed in the Table of Nations amongst the tribal groups occupying parts of Canaan whom God ordered the Israelites to destroy. However, in the cities of the nation the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, do not leave anything alive that breathes. Completely destroy them, the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded you. Deuteronomy, chapter 20, verses 16 and 17. We shall come back to other members in this list. Speakers of a northwest Semitic language, the Amorites consisted originally of a number of nomadic groups who inhabited parts of Syria and Palestine. By the 24th century, some of them had moved to Ebla and settled there, as we know from Amorite names in the city's archives. No doubt the secure, prosperous, and culturally sophisticated environment which Ebla offered, as did places further south like Katna and Hamath, which probably also had Amorite populations at this time, were inducement enough for the traditional pastoralists to exchange their nomadic lifestyle for a more settled urban one. But as their tribal cousins were settling into the comforts and security of a Syro-Palestinian urban existence, other Amorite groups who maintained their traditional lifestyle began spreading eastwards into southern Mesopotamia. Perhaps drought conditions forced them to seek new pasture lands for their flocks and herds across the Euphrates.
All right, so real fast, keep going a little bit more, get a little more understanding on the history. So you see what we just seen a little bit there. So this is going to be Ebla. Just show a little bit of that. And I showed this just for a little understanding on the connection, their family connection, basically connecting with different nations around. This is just some history on Ebla. I just put this here just for some understanding of history, the connections with different parts, right? Haran, things like that. These are going to be very important to note in connection. So these we're going to mostly note here and this one right here. Those are going to be the ones we find the genetics. So we're going to have this one and this one. We're going to take a look at those. So I just want to show you that. That's just a little meat that I just put there. Just going to read something here. In the middle of the 3rd millennium BC, Amar, this is what I already talked about. I already talked about this, I believe. Let me see. Yes. So I just read that. We just talked about some of the things, how we know that that's what it is. That's a city that the Amorites had. A little bit here. I already talked about that information. The city was mentioned. You can see it was mentioned on the tablets of you see this group right here, Yemhadite vessel city of Alaka in modern day Turkey. So that's very important. It's at the edge of Turkey because we had talked about that before, that there's evidence of the peoples who had came to the Levant when we think of the Canaanites and different things like that, that settled in the Levant and stuff like that. They were people that came from the Zagros Mountains. And remember, the Zagros Mountains, they stretch out. These are actually the Zagros Mountains. But the Caucasus will be up here. So when they say the Zagros, it's because individuals that will be over here. And then you'll have people in the Caucasus in the higher parts of the mountain that actually started to come down and settle over here. But they were individuals that were higher than those places. That's very important. That's very important. But let's keep on going because we're going to get a little more into the factual information. So obviously, remember, we talk about the princesses and stuff like that. They were marrying in with each other. You can see right here. They was basically the ones at Ebla, the Eblamite. They sent a princess, right? And they had married into basically other nations, and they were basically one. And this is their dynasty. This would be their dynasty right here. That's very important. The reason why is because there's two different groups. So sometimes you got to remember, Amorites, ancient Amorites, are originally Hamites, but there's also Amorites that are going to be more of a northern nation that joined with the Amorites. And that's how they were very large. They would also take in other people and grow. And that would actually cause the nation to be a little stronger. Here's a little something I want to show you real fast. I think this is very interesting. So again, just showing you the genetics from that location. And if I recall, this is that same one that with that video. So remember, we was talking about them coming from this area, swinging over and settling over here. We had talked about that in the last video as well, when we talked about the genetics reached all the way from Turkestan. So we talked about a couple things. So this talks a little bit about them, just to show you that this study is about the Amorites. Is a little bit right here. Although these groups were named likely based on designations, Amorites and Hurrians, the figurative context of their culture identity and their geographic origins remain debated. Why is it debated? Because of what's found in them. We're going to look at that. What's found in them is very important to understand. When we look at those things, we're going to get an understanding of what's really going on in this world. It's very, very important to understand what's really going on in this world. It's very, very interesting and very, very important. So we had talked about some of the kingdoms. It talks about the history of the kingdoms and stuff like that, and the knowledge that, and we know what age it is, because we're going to look at that when certain kingdoms like this kingdom was destroyed, it was never rebuilt. So right here, just talking about the data, the New Bronze Age city was the seat of Amorite leaders since the beginning. From circa 17 BC or 18 BC, Ebla was subjected to King Yamhad. You can see obviously being influenced by this one and whatnot. And basically, long story short, I'm just going to say what happens at the end. The site never recovered as a regional center. That's important. That when the city fell, by the time it fell, it was done with. It never recovered as a regional center, although it was continuously occupied during the late Bronze Age. The late Bronze Age, so though it fell 17s, it was occupied by a little bit of the Amorites 16 to 2000 BC, or 12,000 BC. And that's very important to understand. It's known by the investigations of the area. But let's look a little more, because I want to show you this now. Close this. Come back over here.
By 2300 BCE. Amorite invasions. By the Middle Bronze Age, circa 2300 to 2000 BCE, the Amorites had invaded the Levant and Middle Euphrates region. Garfinkel, 2007, described tombs of this period that contain what have become known as warrior burials, as defined by a particular assemblage of grave goods including distinctive pottery, javelins, daggers, axes, and spearheads of Amorite kings. The Mar-Tu are mentioned in a tablet from Tel Farah, dated to around 2550 BCE. Mardu, appears on the 24th century BCE Ebla tablets as a name for both a geographic region as well as its inhabitants. According to Lundqvist, 2008, some scholars have specifically identified the Amorite homeland with Jebel Bishri, a mountain region situated between Palmyra and the Euphrates River. Similarly, Michael Astor, 1992, has also traced Marduk-ki, the Amorite homeland in the Ebla tablets, to Jebel Bishri. The Mari texts make it clear that during the Bronze Age, Jebel Bishri was the territory of at least two Amorite tribes, the Sutians and the Yamanites. There are more than 400 stone burial mounds, or cairns, on the northern and western slopes of Jebel Bishri. The mound fields were generational burial places of the Amorites, and several were utilized for many centuries. For example, Ristvet, 2015, found the use of the Tor Rahum cairns has been dated to between 1900 and 1600 BCE.
All right, so we're going to be looking at ancient burial grounds. So it's very important to understand when we're looking at these genetics, we're going to get a perfect understanding on who were the Amorites based on the biblical narrative. So remember, Abraham lived about 2000 BC, right? So 2000 BC, Remember, he said in the fourth generation, the time of the Amorites wasn't fulfilled yet. So 2000, so about 16 BC, 17, 16 BC. That's important to understand that the Amorites were still there. It's important to understand that the Amorites were there in that city, in that area. And that, in fact, established Babylon and had a nice little spot that they had there. So you can see this is very important. So we can actually find out who they are. Now, I'm going to show you now. I'm going to show you the Amorites. So this is what I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you ancient mtDNA of the Amorites. So I'm going to show you right now. So this is going to be it. It's going to be the real thing, the real genetics. So we're going to know who exactly are the Amorites, 100%. So you can see this Turkey. That's where the Amorites were. That's very important. Remember we had talked about that? Let's get one more look real fast to get a good idea what location we're talking about. See this area right here? It's at the edge, the very edge right here of Turkey. That's very important. They had a nice area of influence because the Amorites had a lot of control of these areas. That's very important. So get a good idea. I don't think this one has a better map. You can see also some areas that the Amorites had. All of these areas. All right. You can see these names right here. These names, remember these names right here? All right. We're going to see the real genetics of the real Amorites. No debating. All right. So this is the real locations of the Amorites. You can see that name right there. Al-Laka. We're going to see the real genetics that are in these areas. So you can see these locations, Al-Laka. Remember this one right here? These are also some locations. Ebla. See what's going on there? See these areas? See this name? These areas? All right, we're going to see the ancient Amorites. Ancient Amorites. It's going to be ancient Amorites in the Levant. All right? It's going to be ancient Amorites in the Levant. And let's see what we find. All right, so this is going to be your mtDNA, and this is going to be your Y-DNA. Almost every Amorite is a J lineage. Almost every Amorite. Now that's important because truth is important. If we're gonna find Amorites in a J lineage, or if you can also see E1B1B. Why is E1B1B up there? Because remember, this is very important to know that during the time of Abraham, he had other sons. He had a lot of different sons. For example, he's going to have Arabs. That's important. But where did Arabs settle? They settled in Saudi Arabia. And they were in different locations. But these ones that you're seeing here, these are going to be multiple different lineages of J that are dominant. These are going to be dominant lineages that are in the Amorite area. We also got some G's. That's very important. We see them from different locations. We can see them from far away. That's very important. That's going to be more like a European lineage. So you can see what else we got. T. We have T's there. Some L's. These are going to be the lineages of the Amorites. That's important. Now notice. Now what's important about this is that if you notice today, there's an excuse. There's an excuse that's going on today, and I need to open it and talk about this excuse. There's an excuse that's going on today, and they say that the Ashkenazi today, they say that the women that they have, they just met those women. They never knew them before. They just somehow, some way met them. They didn't have any ties with them before. They say that those were European women that they met after being exiled. Is that true? Is that an actual true statement? I don't know if you've seen that statement, but we have to prove all things and hold fast to that which is true. I'm going to show you something now that I think is very important. I think it's important because we can't just believe everything that's said. We got to prove all things and find the solid truth of what's going on. We got to look at what's solid and find out what's going on here, right? Because they say J-p58 is Aaron, right? You've probably seen it. We already talked about it. The CMH lineage. I talked about it last time, where they try to say that the lineage that is supposedly of Aaron is J1-p58 or of J1-m267. But sometimes people pinpoint and say it's J1-p58. But that's of J1-m27. But we find this lineage being mostly of Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Babylonians, and many other groups. So the reason why I'm showing you this is because I think truth is important. But let me show you something. We can know this is 100% true by noticing what they say about the female lineage. And I think it's very interesting how they do this. Because if you've seen let me just show one. In fact, I got a list. I'll show the female lineage. The reason why it's important because the modern lineage matches that lineage. The modern lineage matches that lineage to a T. That's very important. I'm going to show you. I'm going to grab it from let me just type it down. Or I can search it, but I'll grab it off one of these notes. I think it's important to match things perfectly, to find perfect truth, because truth is good. I think truth is good to have. I think it's important. I think it's important to know truth. I don't know what's going on with this note. I think it was trying to open. Try it again. Open up the note. Or else I'll type it down. Just find it. It's not hard to find. I'll just type it down. Let me show you something. The Jewish mtDNA. Shouldn't be hard to find. There it is. So you can see right here, this would be the idea of the Jewish mtDNA. It's very important. That's the idea of the Jewish mtDNA. Okay, so what's interesting is now, if you haven't seen, they were trying to basically denounce the female lineage. I don't know if you've seen that, but this is a new thing that's happening now that they actually found out. They say overall, it seems that at least 80% of Ashkenazi, basically maternal ancestry, your female lineage, is due to they say the assimilation of mtDNA indigenous to Europe, most likely through conversion. Now, that's important to understand. They basically just said their female lineage is European. All right, let's just be honest. They say the tree, whatnot. It says it happens that their mtDNA lineage were basically European. That's important to understand. That's a true statement. That's a 100% true statement that they themselves say. That they themselves say is what I'm saying. Is that they themselves say this. But let me show you that they themselves do say this.
So one of the more exciting subjects I found is a study of the seminal people, the Jews. Judaism, after all, maintains in part its tribal roots. It's one of the few religions, other than, let's say, Zoroastrianism, which is really a tribal religion still. It's beyond population, maybe went from 25 to 100,000, and it's during that period that the core of Jewish ancestry was formed. As for the female DNA, this is interesting. I have a startling statement to make, which may be that none of you here who are Ashkenazi Jews may be under the laws of Israel Jewish. That is true by DNA, and this is going to present some fascinating theological problems. The reality of it is that most of female DNA that they've done testing of traces back to European populations, Whether they were pagan or Christian, it's not clear, but they almost certainly were not Semitic. There is a sizable percentage of DNA on the female side that does trace back to the Middle East, but the majority of it traces back to Europe and seems to indicate that the pattern of Jewish communities, Ashkenazi Jewish communities, was traders or middlemen, nobility aides, whatever, either brought up by the aristocracy or who wandered there because there was a sense of opportunity during brief periods of openness, and they took on local wives. Now, if they went through a formal conversion process, and that's your genetic line, you are Jewish under Israeli law. If they didn't, if they just took a local woman as their wife and that local woman was pagan or Christian, they didn't go through a formal conversion process, if the rabbis of Israel find out about it, you have a little bit of a problem. The reality of it is that most of us today who are Ashkenazi are probably the descendant of a Semitic Jewish male and either a convert or a Christian or pagan who didn't convert, but quickly was assimilated into the small but soon growing Jewish community, raised their children as Jews, but if you ultimately trace it back, they're not so Jewish.
Okay, so the reason why I wanted to show you that is because it's interesting that with such a claim like that, and you can always use genetics to look back into ancient sources and look at things that sometimes humans can lie about. Because look, you know what they're saying? Let me show you something. You know what they're saying? They're saying that somehow, some way, they picked up those lineages in Europe later on. But I beg to differ. The reason why is because if we look at their genetics, I'm going to type it down again because I don't know why that thing keep closing. So right here, you see this? You see the H, you see the J, you see that K. You know why they said a sizable, sometimes they try to say a sizable part is still from the Middle East. The reason why is because at first they thought K was his own lineage, but they found out that K was in U8. That's what they found out, that K was, and that made a big deal because that was one of the they tried to pass as, if you ever seen it, that was a thing they passed a while back. This is what they were saying. They were saying 4 founding mothers who lived in Europe. This was the scientific report, but I'm gonna show you what happened in the Ashkenazi community, what they spread it. 4 founding mothers who lived in Europe 1,000 years ago were the ancestors of 2/5 of all Ashkenazi Jews. Basically, long story short. Let me show you what they passed out and said. So I'm going to show you what basically they said that they celebrated from while hearing that report, and it's right on this site right here. It's like one of the classic sites they have. But watch what it says here. In a fascinating study in 2006, they showed that 40% of all Ashkenazi Jews were descended from just 4 Jewish, they put Jewish, it never said Jewish, it said European, women who lived more than 1,000 years ago. So that was one of the things that were passing around, and then it morphed and it turned to this. They start saying, well, that's 4 mothers. If you're part of these 4 mothers, then you're Jewish. For example, you can see right here, it says 4 major founder lineages within haplogroup K and N. But they actually found out something interesting. That's what this result was, that they actually found out that the lineages actually trace back to ancient European populations. And that's very important because that's what happened with the nations of old. A lot of nations, they actually, you got to remember that when Babylon was there, that was a place where a lot of nations were linked up together. But this is what we know, haplogroup K actually arose in U8. That's in Europe. That's very important. They try to say in the Near East, but we know that is actually a European lineage because it actually says all most likely arising in Europe between the last glacier period and the Neolithic. That's very important. So the reason why this is important, because look at these groups and then watch what you see here. So your H, your J, your N, your T, your U's, your K's. Let's go back and let's look back on here. So you can see, going back to this list. So what do you see here in the land? Remember, What groups, what genetics are we looking at here? What genetics is this? We got to know what we're looking at 100%. We're looking at the land of the Amorites, when the Amorites ruled, during the time that they had a major power over the area. That's very important, right? So you see these areas here where the Amorites ruled. This is very important to note these times. See those times right there? That's very important. It even goes, basically, that's saying that it went all the way to the 19th century, to the 12th century. You know that when Israel was there, they were still ruling, but they started in the 2000 BC. 2000 BC, remember, it was said to Abraham that the time of the Amorites wasn't finished yet because they were ruling in this area. That's very important. Just remember that they were ruling in these areas. The Amorites are very powerful people. So a lot of people start being named Amorites. Not everyone was a descendant of the Amorites, of the Hamite Amorites, but a lot of them became part of the Amorite state. So they started being called after that state. So you can note that, like, people being in a nation for a long time, someone being living in a nation called Spain, called the Spaniard, or different things like that can happen with anyone. That's very important. Now, let's go back over here. So remember, this is what we're looking at. H, J, K, N, T. U's, W's. And if you remember some of the groups from yesterday, X's and stuff like that, you'll see your X's there. You see what's going on here? Your J1, J2, J1 and J2. You got remember the female lineages? H, J, K, N, T, U, things like that. You can see this in the land of Amorites. What's going on there? H, K, J, T, U. You see what's going on there? And remember, they're still with the J. They're still with the J. That's very important. With the Ks, these are the lands of the Amorites. This is very important. This is very important to understand that the lands of the Amorites, you see these genetics here, it was a European dominance in the land of the Amorites. Now, that's very important because truth is truth. It's just truth. That's all I want to bring out to you is truth. So you understand what's going on here. So you can see it's going to be your mtDNA, it's your Y-DNA. Just getting a look at what's going on here. This is actually, long story short, you're seeing a few P58s. That's what you're seeing here. You're seeing a few P58s. Let me read this thing to you again real fast, what it says here. And this is right off of Wiki. It's on Wiki right now. You look up what's the one I'm looking for? That Kohanam lineage, and you see where those lineages came from. You're going to find some very interesting things right here. Just look up JM268 or 67, J-M267, have a group on Wiki, and go to Ancient Genetics. And you'll find this. To tell you right here that 5 out of 12 individuals were, in this time, during the time of the Amorites, belonged to J1-p58. Where was Aaron? Where were the Levites? Leave out, you see 3 out of 6 from Ebla, who lived between this time. Was Israel in Israel during this time? That's very important. You see what's going on here? P58. And even so, the location is Ebla. Let me show you something about Ebla. And this is very important because here we don't even need a time. You know why? Because also when we think of certain cities like this city up here, you see this city right here of the Amorites? This city was a city that the Amorites had that was not rebuilt. I'm going to read you something real fast. Remember how I said 5 out of 12 individuals of Alaka who lived 1930 BC to 1325 BC belong to haplogroup J1-p58. You see what's going on there? So 5 individuals that claim to be Aaron, 5 individuals that claim to be this descendant in Ebla claim to be the lineage of Aaron. You see what it's saying here? It's saying while not being directly from the line of Aaron, you could be a descendant from one of his numerous male relatives. That's very important to understand. That's trying to say that this lineage is the line of Aaron. The line of Aaron throughout the biblical narrative is traced throughout the whole time of the biblical narrative. We know exactly where they are and when they come, where they go. That's very important. But look carefully. Look carefully so you understand that it's not just talking about. It's not just about the dating. It's about the location. It's about the location because it says it was an ancient city state, a late Bronze Age capital, right by this river in Turkey, whatnot. It was occupied from 2000 BC when the first palace was built and likely destroyed in the 12th century BC and never reoccupied. Never reoccupied. That means the only people that you'll find there, you're not going to find Israel there. It's very important to understand that you will find individuals there that will be the original Amorite nations. That's very important to understand. That's very, very important to understand. So let's get a little understanding on a little bit more, just a little more, to get a full understanding on what's going on here, because this is very important. Let me just show you a 1 minute summary of the end of that city.
Welcome back to the Accessible Art History YouTube channel. For this week's episode, I'm showcasing a sculpture that represents a historical first. So to learn more, keep on watching. This statue is called the Statue of Idrimi. Dating from the 16th century BCE, the statue was discovered during the digs of the site of Alaka by the British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley in the 1930s. Idrimi was the king of the Akkadians. The sculpture is actually most famous for its inscription. It contains the first written historical reference to Canaan. The inscription itself is quite fascinating. It tells the viewer how, following an argument, King Idrimi and the royal family were forced to flee Yamahad to his mother's family at Imar on the river Euphrates. The king then trained with the Hapuri warriors at Canaan for 7 years. He was determined to get his kingdom back. There is also a note in the inscription warning the viewer not to harm the statue, lest they come to harm themselves. Historical firsts are always fascinating to study, especially ones as old as this remarkable statue.
All right, I don't know if you caught that, just real fast, just basically long story short, that was one of the people of the Akkadians. That's who took down basically what happened at the end of that. Long story short, that's how it ended, by this person who set himself a statue there. And it's contested by the written account on them. If you know a little bit about that, you probably know a little more on that. But just to make it clear, I'm not going to go deep into this idol worship and whatnot. But that little thing had writings on them. And it told a whole story about what happened to that city in a couple of different things. He basically ruled over the city that you see. What's that? Allah right here. Allah, however you say that. That city right there was basically, it was never reoccupied. Long story short, it was never reoccupied. So I just put a little more meat here just to show you something. I'm going to show you this last little video, and I'll leave it at this. Understand what I'm showing you is that this is a complete understanding. You can see it all. It's all in the description. It's going to be true meat. So, but I'm going to show you how, remember I was showing you how the Assyrians, the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Canaanites, because remember, I was showing you also on this note's in the description too. I was showing you, I put a little more meat here. There's a little more meat on these things, whatnot. I might do a live on this because it's so complex, and maybe I'll do it a little more smoother so it can be understood. But I just wanted to bring this out to the brother so you can see what's going on here with these things, beloved family. And it doesn't matter if you're E1B1A or if you're J1 itself. Just accept the truth. Let's just accept the truth and live in truth so that truth can be abounding, right? And make way for the king. Make way so the land can be filled with the right people so that maybe something good can come. Do the right thing. But the reason why I was talking about this, because remember I was talking about these 5 cities and whatnot. I just put some meat there just to get some understanding on these 5 cities, these Canaanite cities. And remember, this is ancient Canaanite cities before Israel comes there when you're looking at these genetics and everything. So these are going to be Megiddo and certain cities. Just put some meat there just to give some understanding of these little cities that were occupied. As you can see, 2000 BC to 15 BC. That's very important. That's very, very important. And then this is going to be, because remember, about the Iron Age, that's when Israel's really reigning in these areas. Because remember, they were still working their way, crossing from Moab and Ammon and all those stuff and whatnot. They were still working their way into these areas. They never really got into settled in these areas, like the time of Kings. In the time of Kings, they got settled into some of these areas, started having a lot of these people subject to them. But during this time, and especially these areas right here, where we think of the Amorite cities, these ones weren't touched by Israel. These ones were touched by other nations. That's very important to understand. Far from Israel. But that's why when we think of the Canaanites, that's who they were. They were a northern people that came down from this area. That's very important. That's very, very important. So that's when you think the Phoenicians, right? The Phoenicians, that's who we're talking about when we're thinking the Phoenicians, right? Like, for example, yesterday's video, I put something in the description because I talked about the obvious one, the one in Sidon. Now, I didn't think there's nothing else to talk about because after realizing there's a LP58 in Sidon, I didn't think, maybe the world's going to change, after that. Because that's not just simple. It's just not a simple find. That's not something where you just say, well, just call it a good day and everything.
Now, what is J1-p58? We did a big live on that.
But right here, you can see, here's a little sample.
How we know that it's old. Bronze Age, right before the Iron Age, right? Lebanese samples, right? And we're going to see what's going to happen here, what they actually find in them. Now, watch what they find in them. J1-p58. Now, what is J1-p58? We did a big live on that. We had talked about that J1-p58. J2 as well. We can actually take a look. You see J-p58? Now, this is very important. Why? Because this lineage is supposedly the Kohanam lineage. This is supposedly that lineage. This is the one that's supposedly the lineage that's supposed to be of the high priest line.
So you can see, now if you know about the history, remember, you can look at Judges, you can read it, read what it says about Sidon. They didn't push out the inhabitants of Sidon. Sidon's inhabitants weren't pushed out. Sidon's inhabitants were in the midst of its own, was in the midst of many nations in the Phoenician area. That's very important. That Tyre and Sidon was a nation that was basically separate from Israel and wasn't taken. You see Tyre and you see Sidon right there. This is where the kingdom of Israel is. You see that slope like that? These cities, these ones, they kept their place for a long time. That's very important. And that's what we found there. Right in the middle in royal areas where you had like head honchos and stuff like that. That's very important. So that's what we talk about. New DNA evidence helped track the Canaanites to find out who were the original Canaanites. You can see what they're talking about when they're saying that they found the Canaanites 2,000 years, right, up to 12 BC. You can see what's going on, right? That's very important. That's the one we were talking about with the ancient genetics, right? 73 individuals at 5 sites. I don't know what it says right here, 5 sites, pretty much. That's very important, is that when they found those, they were able to connect them to where they were from to bring them down there. They're not here. It didn't pinpoint here. That's going to be where Israel came from. But it's talking about they came further from the mountains, right? Think Georgia, Armenia, things like that, Turkestan, things like that. They came really, really far away. Why is that important? Because truth is important. That's very important to understand. That truth is very important. It's very, very important. So now the reason why I'm showing you this is because I want you to understand without a doubt that what I'm showing you is true. So I'm going to show you this piece here. This last piece, I think it should be the last piece. But there's more history I'm not going to go into now, but there's more to it. But I'll just show you this last piece just for the live sake. I'm going to read this thing because it don't really have sound. So obviously this is the land of Canaan. Let me just read some things that's said here because the theory here is absolutely truth. You can see right here, man, we talked about the Phoenician territory. That's Sidon right there. That's very important. It actually comes to find out that many of the nations around were actually highly related. Now, when I say related, this is going to be important to understand that a lot of nations, as we found out with the Canaanites, became Japhetic nations. That's very, very important. So you can see right here, some of the Philistines obviously reached to lower cities. That's the cities of the Philistines. We also found out that many of them in genetic studies are very related. The Phoenicians, Canaanites, a lot of them are related. You can see, talk about the Amorites, the lineage of the Amorites and who they are. Obviously, we know when we think of this location, that's going to be the area that the Amorites ruled at, right? It's very important. But you can see this professor, he had an idea, understanding that the Canaanites, the Amorites, and many of the nations, Assyrians, Babylonians, some of the nations that were called Sumerians, sitting in the area of Samaria, Samaria, basically or the area of the Fertile Crescent, right? They related. A lot of them are related. That's important because they were mixing by the female lineages. And what will happen is not that you can ever mix a male. That's important to understand. You can never mix a male, but what you can have sometimes is that you'll have a group like this, but it'll be a bunch of Y chromosomes, but they'll be under a group of females, the same females. And these females are Hittite females. Basically, you know that saying where it says your father was an Amorite and your mother was a Hittite? This is what you're seeing here. That's basically prophecy fulfilled on levels of levels. But you can see right here what's going on. It's just talking about how they got a connection. They're all connected. Long story short. So I just want to show a little bit of that. And there's obviously, if you want to see it, there's meat to that. So I'll just leave it off on this last piece.
King of Yamad in northern Syria.
By the mid-2nd millennium, the Amorites had more or less integrated with the other groups in Mesopotamia to the extent that they were no longer seen as outsiders. It's interesting to note that the term Amorite also shows up many times in the Old Testament of the Hebrew Bible. By the mid-2nd millennium, heard of. We've all learned about his code of laws in school, but he was so much more than just a lawgiver. He actually built a pretty sizable Mesopotamian empire for himself. During this time, Babylon was possibly the largest and most prosperous city in the world. Another great ruler of Amorite descent was Yarim-lim I, the king of Yamad in northern Syria. By the mid-2nd millennium, the Amorites had more or less integrated with the other groups in Mesopotamia to the extent that they were no longer seen as outsiders. It's interesting to note that the term Amorite also shows up many times in the Old Testament of the Hebrew Bible.
All right, so that's what you're seeing here. So anything when it comes to biblical history, I'm just digging deep in, just digging to the core. So what you just seen there was I showed you that they denied their own women. They were denying the women. They were saying that, yeah, they're European, but we're Ashkenazi and we just met them. We don't know them. There are some women that we picked up along the line that was never with us before. That's false. As you see, the J lineage had these women with them early on, a long time ago. That's very important. So if these are called European, then the J lineage is European, and therefore they must accept that they're not Ashkenazi, that they're a lineage of a Japhetic invasion that joined with the Amorites that took over the Levant while Israel was in Egypt. So you see what's going on there? These ancient cities that were never rebuilt by the Amorites. So now you know the truth. So now you know the truth, because the reason why you know the truth is because they won't show you the truth, but we're going to bring you the truth so that you know the truth. So that family, the reason why we're going to keep doing this is because of things. This is controversial, but have you seen something like this? Have you heard this before? But apparently the study was there. The study was there, but it was just not released. The study was there, but it was just not brought out. Just looking to see if I showed you everything I wanted to show you. Just looking here. One more look just to see, so you can see these places that I was showing you here. So who is the Amorite? Based upon archaeology, based upon the actual finds. Remember, they got the same lineages today. The same lineages that they say that they just picked up along the way. And I said that makes no sense, because that would mean that every female that followed with the Israelites would have been wiped out. That makes no sense to imagine such a thing like that. That's not what happened. Rather, they are the same groups of what they were before, right? They're just the same groups of what they were before. And something happened where there was a time that people forgot who was who, right? So you see those lineages there, right? So there was a time that people forgot who was who. So you can see, we just talked about that. So you can see the lineages here and these lineages here. This gives us understanding. And also what's interesting about this little thing is that you can see there's a lot of lineages that's still in the mix, because if you put all these together, right? If you take all these lineages and put them together, you know what you'll get? Or you could just type it like this. The Jewish Y-DNA. And you see what you're seeing there? If you go to that list, you go to this list, GL, J, of course, and the E and all that. That's what you see in the Ashkenazi. And the reason why that is because that's what they were doing in ancient times. In ancient times, they were giving their women, you see that G, J, see what's going on there, R? That's what you see there. You see what's going on there? Your G, J, right? I think you see an R somewhere. I know they have to be an R because usually the Japhetic nations, they will have an R somewhere. There it is, R, right there. So you can see what's going on there. Your T. See what's going on here? T, J, E. And this is what you say if you say an Ashkenazi. And the reason why that is because the women. Because what would happen is this. And understand, I'm telling you this in truth. Understand this. The women can change the color of the males. If you have all the same women, let's say if all the women are European, and let's say even if the male is slightly a little different, the women over time would have them look exactly like one people. So this group of many different males, by the mingling of different women, they actually started to call each other the same. Remember, I talked about that yesterday, where the nations, all the upper nations would call each other brother. All the upper nations were calling each other brothers. And that's very important to understand. So the same lineages of today that they deny, that's part of them, U8 and your X's and your K's and things like that, they try to deny that these were with them back then. Well, how are they going to deny that they're Amorites? So just understand that. What I'm just showing you here is absolute truth. The links is in the description. There's more meat on these notes, much more meat. Maybe I'll go over it one time onto some things that were found and some things to go over. Like, for example, something that I added real fast on this note. I'm going to go up a little bit, right? Because remember, when the Sea Peoples came down, Ebla was destroyed by the Sea Peoples. The Sea People invasion and a lot of the cities of the Amorites were taken away. So you can see right here, remember that city, Allahha, Allahka, and Ebla, and all those cities. This one too. These cities were taken when the Sea People invasion happened. Those cities were taken. But what I wanted to show you real fast. Remember, I was talking yesterday on how we have connection from India, and I'll talk about some people in ancient times came from India to here, and I was showing you that was the J lineage. That's the one that actually did that. You can note that even with the Roman route. I'm going to show you something with the Roman information, not today, but maybe Synthetic Sunday. I'm going to show you what happened in Rome. What really happened in the change of Rome. I'm talking about the real fall of Rome, when the Ottomans came there and sacked Constantinople. I'm going to show you the haplogroups that were there. Very interesting to note. We're going to talk about ancient individuals in Rome. So right here, you can see this genetics here. Long story short, I'm going to show you, because I had shown you this before when I was talking about those groups that were related, right? Like, for example, let me read it so I don't go too ahead. I was talking about yesterday, this part. I'm going to go up and just read it real fast. Just going to go to Assyria. I was going to do this real fast just to have this live here just for record's sake, but make it a little longer, I guess. Let me show you something real fast. Let me see, where's Assyria? Syria, right here. All right, so watch what it says here. Remember I talked about this in a 2008 study on the genetics of old ethnic groups of Mesopotamia, including 340 individuals from 7 ethnic communities, right? Different ethics. Remember I said, what are ethics? Ethics it's like the form of religion. It's not really a thing that separates people, right? It's not haplogrouping. It's just ethics. Like someone says they're this, right? You could say Jew, right? Armenian, Arab. What's an Arab? When they say Arab, they're actually saying Muslim. A lot of times when people say Muslim, they think Muslim's a race. Muslim's not a race. But when they say Arab, they just bunch of people together that's Muslim and say they're Arab. Assyrian, Jew, that's people that practice Judaism. That's the ones that's Ashkenaz. You see the Zoroastrian, where we say that is, that right there we're going to look at. But listen to what I'm saying this. Assyrians, Jews, Armenians, they say Muslims, Turkmens, because they try to make them Arabs and whatnot, represent ethnic groups from Iran. And watch what it says right here. I'm going to just skip right here. Watch what it says here, what they found. Found that the Assyrians were homogeneous. Now, that's just saying they were alike. They were the same. It's saying that all these people were the same. All these are the same. And that's what I've been saying for a long time, that the Turks, the Armenians, the ancient Assyrians, all these groups, though they have different religions, they're the same with respects to other ethnic groups sampled in the study, regardless of a religious affiliation. Let me show you something. You see this study right here? I'm going to click something here, and I'm going to show you something from this study. In fact, let me make sure I read what this is. So remember, I was talking about those Zoroastrian, whatever they are. It says, is the oldest, basically, religion in the world, they say, originating in Persia, right? Present-day Iran, during the 2nd millennium BC. Historical records indicate that migrations from Persia brought that religion to India. But there's a debate over the timing of these migrations. But we know these migrations were ancient times. But here's an example of modern day comparison. You can see what it says here. Just going to go up. You can see you're going to have a lot of J's that went from here to over here, right? You're going to have mixing. This is basically what they say, what they come to. So it just says, though recent studies have investigated the origin of different Jewish populations from India, like they say this one, the Cochin Jews, and these ones and whatnot. And it talks about, long story short, it says this religion that they have, that the Persians had from Iran and India, and provided genetic evidence for their historical exodus. It's basically letting you know that it's no doubt. Like what we talked about yesterday, India and basically the Middle East was mixing. It was people from India that came back around and came back to the Middle East, and that's that J lineage. And we had talked about all the lineages that were found in them for the evidence of that. So remember, what I'm showing you is for real. It's unbiased information, but it's information that only we can bring forth. So know this for real, what I'm saying. What I'm saying is without a bias. What I'm saying is truth. The lineage that we found to be Amorite is J-p58. The J1 lineage is found to be a Japhetic lineage that came down. It's just a truth. It's just a truth. So it was a lineage that was up here. It was a lineage that was over here because we found some. Remember, I showed you the ancient lineages they had also in this area. And they had ancient lineages over here that connected all the way to India. And then we also found that there are ancient genetics that connect all the way in these areas, all the way to Turkestan, all of these areas. And then they try to deny their own females, but the females were there before. So what you're seeing here is without a doubt the truth. So with that, family, I just want to say the Lord's Prayer. I want to pray for you. Our Father in heaven, honored be thy name. May thy kingdom come. May thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us each day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us on a righteous path and guard us from the evil one. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen, amen, family. Be loved, be loved. All love and all peace. When I bring this out, it's all because of truth. And anything else we find, I'm going to talk about that too. So with that, family, be blessed, be beloved, and amen.